Imagine a guy, mid-30s, decent job, fit, smart. He used to chase everything, the promotion, the relationship, the approval, the validation. He hustled, he pushed, he showed up. And then one day, quietly, without announcing it to anyone, he just stopped. Not because he failed, not because he gave up. He stopped because he finally felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. And from the outside, his life looks the same. But on the inside, something fundamental shifted. He stopped caring what you think. He stopped trying to prove himself. He stopped fighting for things that were never going to fight back for him. Millions of men are doing this right now, and the world doesn't quite know what to make of it. Some people call it laziness. Some call it a crisis. Some call it a red flag. But here's the truth. Almost nobody is willing to say out loud. For a lot of these men, this peace isn't a collapse. It's a conclusion. And understanding why they arrived there might be the most important conversation we're not having. There's a psychological concept called the depletion threshold. It's the point at which a person has given so much energy, effort, emotional investment that the cost of continuing outweighs any possible return. Athletes hit it, caregivers hit it, and a growing number of men are hitting it in their everyday lives. But here's what most people miss. The depletion threshold doesn't announce itself dramatically. There's no explosion, no breakdown, no obvious moment you can point to. It happens quietly, gradually, like water wearing down stone. And then one day, the man just recalibrates. Think about what the average man has been absorbing for the last decade or two. He was told to be strong but not stoic, ambitious but not aggressive, confident but not arrogant, provide but don't be defined by providing, lead but not in a way that makes anyone uncomfortable, protect but check your instincts, be vulnerable but not too vulnerable, be present but respect space, assert yourself but be open to being wrong. Now, none of those messages are inherently bad. Most of them are actually good. But here's the thing. When a man receives a constant stream of contradictory signals about what he's supposed to be, and when genuine effort routinely gets reinterpreted as a character flaw, something happens in the mind. It stops calculating what's the best version of myself I can become, and starts calculating something much simpler. Is this worth it? And for a lot of men right now, the answer coming back is no. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't nihilism. It's not weakness. It's a rational response to a cost-benefit calculation that isn't working out. When you pour energy into something, a career, a relationship, a social role, and you consistently get back criticism instead of recognition, exhaustion instead of reward, conflict instead of connection, eventually the brain starts protecting itself. That's not dysfunction. That's self-preservation. So what do you do with this? If you're a man feeling this, acknowledge that the feeling is information, not failure. Your nervous system is telling you something real. The question isn't whether the exhaustion is valid. It is. The question is what you do next. Because stepping back and stepping out of life entirely are very different things, and the line between them matters more than most people realize. There's a term that started appearing in online spaces a few years ago. The quiet strike. It describes men who aren't loudly protesting anything. They're not organizing. They're not complaining on the internet. They're just withdrawing from ambition, from romantic pursuit, from social performance, from the game they were told was worth playing. Now watch how this actually shows up in real life, because the patterns are specific. A 29-year-old software developer works hard for 2 years, gets passed over for promotion twice, watches people with more political savvy and less competence move up. He doesn't rage quit. He doesn't confront anyone. He quietly does exactly what's required, no more, and redirects his real energy into his own projects, his friendships, his hobbies. His manager calls him disengaged. He calls it clarity. A 34-year-old man spends 3 years trying to build something real with a woman, investing emotionally, showing up, being consistent. It ends badly, not because of dramatic betrayal, but because of a slow erosion of appreciation and an escalation of criticism. He doesn't become bitter. He doesn't hate women. He just decides privately that the math doesn't work for him right now. His family asks why he's not putting himself out there. He smiles and changes the subject. A 40-year-old father realizes that no matter what he contributes, the cultural narrative around men like him defaults to suspicion rather than gratitude. He keeps doing his job, quietly, competently, but stops seeking external validation for it. His colleagues think he's grown cold. He thinks he's grown wise. These aren't isolated stories. These are patterns. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The psychology underneath all of these scenarios is the same. It's called learned non-responsiveness. When effort repeatedly fails to produce a predictable outcome, the brain doesn't keep trying with increasing intensity. It disengages, not from life, from the specific loop that isn't working. This is actually well documented in behavioral psychology. It's the same mechanism that causes burnout in high-performing employees, compassion fatigue in healthcare workers, and emotional withdrawal in long-term relationships. It's not a character defect, it's a protective adaptation. The dangerous part, and this is where we need to be careful, is that learned non-responsiveness doesn't discriminate between the things worth abandoning and the things worth fighting for. It's a blunt instrument. A man who steps back from performative ambition might accidentally step back from genuine connection too. A man who builds walls against criticism might end up walling out love as well. So what do? You have to get surgical. The goal isn't to stop caring about everything. It's to get precise about what actually deserves your energy and what was never worth it to begin with. That's a different project entirely, and it requires honest self-examination that most people, men or women, are never really pushed to do. Here's something I want you to sit with, because this is where it gets genuinely complex. Some of this new male withdrawal is healthy. Men setting boundaries, redirecting energy, refusing to perform for the approval of people who don't respect them. That's growth. That's maturity. That's exactly what good psychology looks like when someone stops outsourcing their self-worth to external validators. But some of it isn't peace. Some of it is numbness. Wearing a peaceful mask. Think about this. There's a critical difference between a man who has genuinely processed his pain, understood the lessons, and consciously chosen a quieter, more intentional life, and a man who simply stopped feeling things because feeling them became too expensive. One of those men is free, the other one is frozen, and from the outside they can look almost identical. The man who has found real peace is still curious, still engaged with the world in some dimension, still has things he cares about deeply. He's not bitter about the past. He's genuinely forward-facing, just on his own terms. He can talk about what happened to him without it hijacking his nervous system. He's made his peace by actually processing something, not just by avoiding it. The man who's frozen is different. He's mistaking emotional flatness for emotional health. He doesn't feel the anxiety anymore. That's true. But he also doesn't feel the excitement. He's not protecting himself from pain. He's protecting himself from feeling altogether. And that, over time, becomes its own kind of prison. Here's how you can tell the difference in yourself. Ask this question. Is there anything left in this world that could make me feel genuinely excited? If the answer is yes, even if that thing is small, even if it's only a hobby or an idea or a person you haven't met yet, then you're probably in a healthy withdrawal. Resting, not retreating. But if the answer is silence, if you have to genuinely search for something that could move you and come up empty, that's the signal. Not that something is wrong with the world, that something has gone quiet inside you that needs to come back to life. So what do? You stop treating numbness as victory. The goal was never to stop feeling things. The goal was to stop feeling things that weren't real. The fake urgency, the performative stress, The fear of other people's opinions. Real feeling, real aliveness was always supposed to stay. If it went with everything else, that's not peace, that's loss, and it's worth getting back. Let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a personal story. It has real social dimensions that almost nobody is naming clearly. When men step back from engagement, with work, with relationships, with civic life, with community, something real disappears. Not because men are more valuable than women, not because male participation is obligatory, but because healthy societies need full, engaged participation from all parts of their population, and what we're watching in slow motion is a significant portion of male energy going offline. Think about what that actually looks like at scale. Mentorship disappears. Men who would have once built companies, coached youth sports, led community organizations, mentored younger men, they're redirecting inward. That's not evil. That's understandable. But the mentorship gap is real, and the young men who needed those older figures are finding them in worse places. Relationships thin out. When men withdraw from romantic pursuit, not because they're incapable of love, but because the math of modern relationships stopped making sense to them, the result isn't just fewer marriages, it's men and women becoming increasingly alien to each other. Two groups who should be building lives together, spending more time nursing grievances about each other. And here's the thing that gets almost no airtime. Many of the men who have stepped back didn't want to step back. They wanted to be useful. They wanted to build things. They wanted to love someone and be loved. The withdrawal wasn't the dream. It was the response to the dream not working. That matters. Because the narrative that says men are checking out because they're selfish or immature misses the more accurate and more useful story, which is that men are checking out because the feedback they were receiving made continued engagement feel irrational. If you want different behavior, you need different feedback. That's true in every system, biological, social, organizational. It's not complicated. It's just uncomfortable. Let that sink in. Now we get to the real question. Not why is this happening? We've covered that. The question is, what now? Because there are really two diverging paths in front of any man sitting in this place of withdrawal. Path one is what we could call indefinite retreat. You've decided the game is rigged, so you're not playing. You keep your life small, your expectations low, your emotional exposure minimal. No one can hurt you because you've made yourself unreachable. You find contentment in solo pursuits, controlled environments, predictable routines, and you tell yourself this is wisdom. Maybe for a season it is. Rest is real, recovery is real, boundaries are real, but here's what path one eventually becomes. It becomes a smaller and smaller world. The radius of what you're willing to engage with keeps shrinking. Not because the world is getting more dangerous, but because disengagement is a habit that compounds. And 10 years from now, the man on path one often looks around and realizes he's isolated in a way he didn't choose. It just accumulated, one withdrawal at a time. Path two is what I'd call strategic re-engagement. And it looks very different from what most people mean when they say a man needs to get back out there, which is usually just a way of saying go back and do the same thing that burned you out. Strategic re-engagement means something specific. It means you carry the clarity you've developed, the boundaries, the self-knowledge, the refusal to perform for approval, back into the world. But now you use it differently. You stop chasing validation and start building things for the inherent meaning of building them. You stop pursuing connection from a place of need and start choosing relationships that are genuinely reciprocal. You become, in psychological terms, less anxiously attached and more securely autonomous. You're not withdrawn and you're not desperate. You're present, boundaried, and choosing. Think about this. The men who do this well aren't the ones who never got burned. They're the ones who got burned, understood what the fire was trying to teach them, and came back with better instincts. They're harder to manipulate. They're more selective. They're less interested in impressing people and more interested in doing work that actually means something. They're in many ways the most valuable kind of man in any room, because their engagement is real. You didn't get their performance, you got them. So what does that path actually require? It requires you to grieve what didn't work before you try to build something new. Men are historically terrible at this part. We skip the grief and go straight to strategy. But if you haven't honestly processed what broke you down, you'll carry it into the next thing and repeat the pattern. Grief isn't weakness. It's the mechanism by which you actually integrate the lesson. Then it requires you to define your own metrics. Stop using the world's scorecard. What does a good life actually look like to you? Not what you were told it should look like. Not the external markers you internalized at 22. What do you actually want to spend your finite energy building? Career, relationships, health, craft, community. Pick the ones that are genuinely yours and let the rest go without guilt. And finally, this one is important. It requires you to stay in motion, not frantic motion, not performance, but forward motion. Because men who stay completely still for too long start to believe the stillness is who they are. It isn't. It's where you rested, and rest has a purpose. The purpose is to move again. The most dangerous version of this new male piece isn't the men who are resting. It's the men who have decided somewhere deep down that they are not worth the effort of their own full life. That's the version nobody is talking about. Because it doesn't look dramatic. It looks like a guy who's doing fine, who has his routines and his hobbies and his careful, manageable life, who smiles at the right times and says I'm good, and means it in the shallowest possible sense of the word. These men aren't broken, they're just quietly absent from their own story. And the distance between where they are and where they could be isn't filled with obstacles. It's filled with decisions they stopped making because they stopped believing the outcome mattered. Here's what I want to leave you with. The peace you found, if you found it, is not the destination. It was never supposed to be the destination. It's the base camp, the place you came to because you needed to stop, regroup and figure out what you actually believe before the noise of the world could drown it out again. You came here to rest, not to disappear. You stopped performing because performance was hollow. But underneath the performance there was always something real, something you actually care about, something that could make you feel like your presence on this planet means something, not to the world's ledger, not to someone else's expectations, but to you. Find that thing, protect it like it matters, and then, when you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready, take it back out into the world. Not because the world deserves it, but because you do.